Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to another episode of The Ways We Move. I am your host, Nicolas Zart. And today we have a kind of a special podcast. It's the end of the year podcast. And I think traditionally we all like to look back and see what has happened this year, 2025. And boy, a lot of things did happen this year. It's been pretty incredible. So we won't have any guests today. We still have plenty of guests, so please always come back and check in for more. As always, thank you for liking, for subscribing, and for sharing. Our downloads are still going up, so I feel very blessed. And indeed, this is a season to count your blessings, and this is definitely one of my blessings. The timing of this podcast is also very important because, technically a year ago we started The Ways We Move, and that was on the 31st of January 2024. So I decided to do it maybe a few days early so you can get it for that last week of December 2025. I want to also take a time to thank you all for making this podcast so incredible or so incredibly successful, because truly 1,000 downloads in 11 months is pretty and fantastic, especially for such a niche podcast like this one. And when I say we, by the way, and I talk about the podcast, it's mostly me and myself and I, obviously, but it's also the support I have around me, which also includes the financial support. But it's mostly you guys that made it what it is. We started 2025 with a few podcasts, and I'm one of the surviving podcasts, and I plan on going much further. In fact, I've launched another website, and I will launch another podcast unrelated to this field of innovative mobility solutions, but with some probably more philosophical twist to it. But I do want to talk about what happened this year, because 2025 has been a very interesting year, and I need to get my cheat notes because I'm not going to be able to remember exactly everything that has happened. For one thing, unfortunately, we did suffer a lot of aviation problems. And I just wrote an article on electricairmobility.news. And that was about, the unfortunate accidents that we have had in aviation. And there have been quite a lot, more so than I believe in a very, very long time. I'll make sure to put the link in this podcast on electricairmobility.news. But we started the year with some really horrible accidents. I'm thinking mostly in the Washington, D.C. area, when a military helicopter collided with I believe it was an American Airlines jet coming in for a landing, and all of this, you can go and read the stories for yourself and figure out what you think of it. But 67 people died. NTSB had a lot of recommendations. Unfortunately, a lot of these recommendations were going to be sidestepped again, and there was enough wisdom at the Congress level to say, no, this is a little too dangerous now. And we've had a lot of runway incursion problems, and that's when, an aircraft is somewhere where it shouldn't be, or an aircraft is landing on the wrong runway. And not just in the US, by the way. I think one of the most famous ones was the one that happened in my hometown of Nice in the south of France, where an airplane was landing on the wrong runway. And in Nice, you've got a takeoff runway and a landing runway. And they had messed up the approaching airplane, basically went on the wrong runway. I think it was only about 30, not even 30 meters, maybe 10 meters above the other airplane. It was very scary. And then lastly, when we're condensing this, because it's not so much for our industry, but there's obviously something we'll learn from all of that. There was the horrendous crash of the MD-11 from UPS, where the right engine separated at takeoff. And this is just, so far, it looks like pure wear and tear problems. And it's problems that McDonnell already had on its previous airplanes. And I know some of you might be screaming bloody murder, but in the 70s, there was a horrible crash. And that's because airlines were taking shortcuts. They were putting back the entire turbojets with a pylon, which they shouldn't have done. And of course, they kept on banging it up, and eventually it gave a lot of wear and tear and fractures and everything. But one thing that's coming out of this crash, and remember, this was a really horrible crash. The MD-11, just like the DC-10, is a 3 turbofan airplane, 1, 2 on the tail, and 3 on the right-hand side of the wing. Number one split up because of wear and tear at the fastening of the back pylon took off like that, and then somehow managed to go, because there's a lot of centrifugal force in those turbofans, and they lean towards one side. So when an airplane takes off, it really wants to go that way because of that force of the spinning blades, and it went all the way up, put debris in the back number 2 turbofan, and then hit also, apparently we will have to know a year from now, in the last remaining engine. And that was just a horrible accident, because it happened at the worst time ever. These guys could not do anything any better than they did, and they didn't fully know what was going on. They can't see what was going on. So this was a tragic, very tragic accident. What does this have to do with advanced air mobility? Well, probably not so much directly like this, but it also means that we've got to really be careful and continue on the safety part of our lives, which really in aviation is everything. I mean, reputable engineers and even hopefully decision makers always wake up with safety in mind and go to sleep with safety in mind. And that's one of the reasons why we love eVTOLs, electric vertical takeoff and landing. Where do I have my little, I put it away. Those aircrafts that go up, and then that can, go up like a helicopter, fly like an airplane, and go down and land just like an airplane, a helicopter. Boy, I'm having a hard time today. It's the end of the year, guys. Give me a break. And eSTOLs, electric short takeoff and landing. Those are airplanes that take off in a very short amount of space and land in even short amount of space. And eCTOLs, regular electric airplanes. The reason why we love them so much is that, for the most part, there is not one single point of failure, except if you only have an electric airplane with one propeller, but all of them have multiple propellers, multiple electric motors, multiple controllers, multiple battery management systems, BMS, and that makes them extremely not only redundant, but very safe to fly. Quieter, obviously. An electric motor is much more quieter than a gasoline or piston engine or a turbine. And by the way, this was also felt in the railroad world way back in the 1920s, when the first heavy-duty electric locomotives were replacing, the job of 2, sometimes 3 steam engines, but in a quieter way, with smoother power delivery, much better power delivery. You can check out the Milwaukee Railway and how they came up with this 260-ton electric behemoth that pulled trains on a 2.2% grade, which is phenomenally high for a railroad. And so we're really seeing again the electric motor deliver all of its promises in this new industry that we're making it happen. I said also the next one that I talked about is this is a personal, I'm not going to spend too much time on that one. I only flew 3 times this year, and let me tell you, I love it. In 2024, I was on an airplane once to twice a month, but this year I only had 3 flights. 2 of them were for business, 2 were for business, and then one of them was for pleasure. And you can go and read the articles. I explain exactly what happened. We had a reboot of a 767. We had a windshield wiper that failed in Lisbon, and of course we were stranded there for an extra day. Thank you, but I don't want to fly anymore. These situations are way just, they're too stressful and not comfortable. And I'm 60, my back hurts. Okay. One of the things that I've noticed too is, and then maybe we're going to break it down again to eVTOLs, eSTOLs, and eCTOLs before we talk about infrastructures. But on the eVTOL side of things, there have been some seriously clear winners in this year. And I know for the most part, I'm hearing that AAM is sort of dwindling down. Not a lot of things are happening. Well, not really, actually. A lot of things are happening, but it's just under the surface. It's the more boring part of things. Again, we're going back to making sure safety is number one and the priority. But there is a lot of work happening under the surface. And that surface is not that interesting for most people, especially those who are really just watching press releases and want to see if Joby or Archer is better. No offense to either one of you guys. We love you both. We love what you're doing, and you certainly are driving the industry forward. But I want to talk, well, let's talk about the big four to start with. So Joby and Archer have done a phenomenal job this year. Now we can kind of, snicker and laugh about, if one comes out with a press release, the other one follows it up, and it is always that race between the two. It's very entertaining, but it also moves the industry forward. It keeps it relevant and interesting. But I did ask both on the last speaking engagements that I had to, now let's start to use the right words, because when you tell people you're going to be certified this year or next year, people expect you and me to be flying with them. And that's just not the right thing to do. Plus, I think it's a big disservice for investors because they think they are putting money down on a company that will be able to fly people next year, and we know that's not the case. So type certification, airworthiness, yes, that's within reach right now, but commercial certification, being able to fly people over cities and everything, we know that's still a few years away, and worse, a few $1 billion down the road. The adage in aviation is always the same: a decade, 1,000 engineers, and $1 billion, and that's just for one airplane. So we're still going through the same things. We might kind of shrink down the time, maybe even the money, and hopefully not the engineers to make those eVTOLs happen. So just a very high, highlights of what happened this year is, Blade and Joby. Joby bought Blade. Blah, blah. That's an interesting one to say very quickly. I'm intrigued with that one for so many reasons, because Joby already inherited of Uber Elevate, which raised a lot of eyebrows, especially for all the other partners who thought, well, what's going on now? All of that, those things we were working on went to Joby, but hey, it works really well for Joby, and now Joby gets Blade. So now Joby, a vertically integrated company, can really truly operate on its own. On the other side of things, there are four big eVTOL companies out there: Joby, Archer, Beta, and Wisk. So let's talk about Archer, the second most well-funded company out there. They've done tremendously well too. They've bought an airport in California, Fullerton, which I actually know really well because I was on a pipistrel at the time. It was called an Alpha electric airplane. Now I think they call it the Velis. And it's a great little airport because it's underused, and like all these underused airports, a lot of space. And Archer bought that airport, and it's going to be the perfect place for Archer to really give us an idea of what it will look like to use their midnight eVTOL. Archer also did something that left a lot of us scratching our head going, why and what are you going to do with it? They bought the IPs to Lilium. You remember Lilium, that German company with their Superjet, or whatever they were calling it, the jet, the eVTOL jet, where these duct fans would trim down, and then, the jet, I guess, would take off in VTOL mode and then fly in normal mode and then land again in that mode. They bought the IPs to that, which led us to ask the question, why did you do it? I mean, that's not really what you're doing right now. Is that something you will use, you will want to develop later, knowing full well that duct fans have a lot of pros and cons, mostly cons right now, especially in this way of operating. And I'm not going to go down into the details of that. We'll have some wonderful people to come on board and tell us about that a little bit later on this year. Excuse me. The other one that I always love, and I'm always feeling bad because there's really not that much to write about or to talk about, is Wisk. And so I'm going to give Wisk a silver medal for this year for continuing and being true to their strategy. And their strategy is no pilots, autonomous only. So they're taking their time. They're well funded. They've got Boeing behind. These guys are just doing the work they're supposed to do. And they're sort of skipping that entry mode of having a pilot inside of their, Generation 6 right now that is flying. So I'm going to give them a silver medal for doing that. I think that's a great idea. We're all going in that direction eventually. Why not just go there directly? And we know it's going to take a little bit longer. So of course, Joby, Archer, even Beta will be out before Wisk. That's not a problem. Let's talk about the fourth one, because the fourth one to me is probably the most interesting one, and that's Beta Technologies. Now, I've loved Beta Technologies since day one in Vermont, in Burlington, when Kyle was flying that odd-looking airplane that had propellers facing the wrong way. And ever since, the company has done one step after the other in the right direction. And that's why I'm going to give Beta Technologies a gold medal for this year, 2025, for doing all the right things. What are the right things? Well, I mean, early on, they decided, hey, they're electric aircraft. There are no charging stations for electric aircraft. Yes, Volatus was working, and is still, by the way, working on a charging station. They're ready to manufacture it now. They're testing it. They have contracts. Wonderful. We'll talk about that some other time. We'll get Grant Fisk on this podcast to talk about that. But Beta decided to give us not one, but two charging stations. So a cube and a regular charging station. Think of the cube as a smaller trickle charging station, and that's good for overnight recharging the aircraft, and a faster one. We're not going to call it really fast charging, because even though CCS is fast charging for EVs, it's not really for aviation. We need a little bit beefier stuff, especially going into the future. But they also did, I think, the most brilliant decision they ever took at the company is to not use their aircraft as an eVTOL just yet. Why? Because it's very energy dense, energy intensive to use an eVTOL, especially as it hovers. And why not? Let's use it as an eCTOL, a conventional takeoff and landing aircraft. And to this day, Beta's pivotal away from the potential of having that eVTOL into an eCTOL makes it the only company that has done that today. And to prove that the concept is sound, it is the only company right now that has two private operators operating their Elia eCTOL 250 eCTOL out there in the wild. So really, congratulations. You guys really deserve that silver medal, because that was amazing. So that wraps it up for the big four. I'm going to talk about the others now, because you really have to keep your eyes on at least three, it's not four other companies, and there are so many others, we won't be able to name them all. But this other company I find is really brilliant. And this company is going to get, I would say, the silver medal, because they did it just right. And that's Vertical Aerospace. Vertical Aerospace, if you remember, started out probably a little bit later than Archer, but went through a very rough starting point. And if you know anything about working in a startup, it is not easy. You do the role of 10 other people. A department inside of a startup does the role of 5 other departments in a conventional, well-funded, well-going company. Vertical had a really bad accident. Basically, it completely wrecked one of their prototypes. And that's a lot of millions of dollars, not down the drain, because they did the right thing. They went very public, they acknowledged it, and they moved on. And this is one thing that any startup should ever do if they have any problem: be public about it, admit it, and move on. And they did it in such brio. I mean, it was brilliant the way they did it. They basically told us, hey, look, it's a prototype. It crashes. That's what it's designed to do. We push the envelope. We know where the envelope stops, really. And in this case, they did. And that's the life of a prototype. That's exactly what it's supposed to do. So kudos Vertical for doing this. They're doing a great job. They just came out with their final design. And it is a wonderful eVTOL that will carry 4 passengers with 6 carry-ons and 6 suitcases. And that is pretty amazing. So I think for me, Vertical is one of those companies that shows you that it's not always, the best thing to be number 1 or even number 2, that sometimes being number 3, a little bit behind, is the best thing in the world. You're not in the limelight. You don't have the pressure of the public and the news on you all the time. You can watch what works and what doesn't work. And I think that's why I'm very excited about Vertical. And I can definitely say in 2026, they will surprise us much more than the others will do. And by the way, 2026, when it comes to Beta, definitely a clear winner, especially on the long run. Beta is going to be here for a long time. So is Joby and Archer, but I think Beta has definitely the best strategy, at least on the surface, from this end of the spectrum. The other company I wanted to talk about too is, I don't write about them very often, is Eve Air Mobility. And as some of you may or may not know, I worked with Eve Air Mobility for a very short amount of time. And it was a very interesting company, because it was one of those companies that was backed by Embraer. And if you don't know the story of Eve Air Mobility, Embraer spun out a sort of a research platform called Embraer X. And Embraer X came out with all kinds of things like beacon for, on-demand parts for aircraft and things like that, and eVTOL mobility. And at the time, Embraer didn't really think much about all of these eVTOLs, which is very strange because De Silva, their CEO and chairman in 2014, pretty much nailed it on the head that an eVTOL should cost around $400,000 once it's mass produced, fly 10 to 20 to half hour with 4 people, and be small enough to land pretty much anywhere. This guy saw in 2014 what that would be, but Embraer changed. Embraer went back to just being an airplane company, which is great. I love their 175s and 195s. And at that time, when it saw that the Boeing deal had gone south, Bombardier was selling its C-Series to Airbus. They were left with, ouch, what do we do now? We have the 175, we have the 195, but we don't have anything else. And they kind of saw that thing called eVTOL mobility, and they're like, we got to bring it back there, which meant I was obsolete at that point because they have their own communication departments. And despite having different points of view on how to go about it, eVTOL mobility had a brilliant strategy from the get-go. It's to get a slice of the pie, each and every single slice of the advanced air mobility pie, meaning the operations, the manufacturing, the operation, I just said, the MROs, the repairs, everything, you name it, they wanted to be part of it. And they've done a brilliant job with that. So they will get a bronze medal for this decision this year. They are also the first eVTOL startup that has worked with another eVTOL startup by purchasing Beta's technology's propeller to put on their own eVTOL. And that is absolutely brilliant because if you think about it, Embraer already develops their own airplanes. Some of them are propeller airplanes. They could have used Embraer to do that, but they chose to go with Beta. So brilliant. This is exactly the kind of cooperation we need to see. It's great for Beta. It's great for eVTOL mobility. Everybody wins. And there are, of course, a lot of other companies under that. I'm going to mention only a few of them. One of my favorite is still John Air Mobility. I still love the company. I still think it's one of the greatest aircraft that there is out there. And I'm always sad when I hear it's not sexy. Who cares? It does a great job. It doesn't have to be sexy. It has to do it well and intelligently and everything. If you don't know anything about John Air Mobility, go and check out their websites. Go and check out the many articles we've written on our site. It's a gyrodyne. It's basically a helicopter with a smaller rotor that can be slowed down completely when in horizontal flight so that it leaves no turbulence or very little turbulence. It has a lot of big weights, 400-pound weights on each side of the rotor. So it has a rotor. It can hover like a helicopter, but it's a gyrodyne. And just like a gyrocopter, and by the way, you can look it up on Vertiport and eVTOL.news. I wrote about my original interview with Jay Carter, who invented, or maybe not invented is not the right word, but who really worked on that gyrodyne technology since the 70s, I believe. And that gave birth in 2019 to John Air Mobility, who invited me to go to NBAA and talk about everything they have done and everything. By the way, that NBAA in 2019 was when we announced the Aero Group and John Air Mobility merger, which, by the way, this year has gone into an IPO. And as all IPOs, it goes up like that and it goes back down, but it's going up again and it will continue to go up again because the strategy is clear and correct for John Air Mobility. Now, like any company, John Air Mobility went through ups and downs. It's normal. Startups do that all the time. But the beauty of a gyrodyne is that they solved a big problem. When a gyrodyne or a gyrocopter takes off, their propeller is like this, but when it takes off, it needs to be like that, which means the attitude of the aircraft, the airplane itself, is in that direction, right? Like this, at an angle like that, which means if you're in it, you're tilting forward. And when you're landing, exactly the opposite, you're like that. So they solved that problem very simply by moving the mass forward. So when the aircraft takes off, it takes off like that. The attitude of the aircraft is always perfect. And when it lands, it does the opposite. It can do so many things. When we talk about operational envelope, the John Air Mobility Journey, that's the name of the eVTOL, can do almost anything any of the other aircraft can do, even go into the eSTOLs and even eCTOL territory. But we'll get hopefully Martin to come and talk about that very soon again. I got to talk about another one of my favorites, because by the way, I will love, you know what, let's give John Air Mobility a silver medal, the same as same. The other company I'm really impressed with, and I'm going to give them also, a gold medal, is in same place with the other company I give a gold medal, and that's Leo Flight. Now, you might not have heard of Leo Flight, but it is one of the smartly run startup in the world. Why is that? Because they already own their IPs, and Pete Batar owns an airport. And Carlos is a designer and understands what to do. These two work really well together, because with the IP of their technology that they're selling to drones, they were able to self-fund their very first one-seater eVTOL. And now they're working on a two-seater, and I can tell you there will be more in the future. So I love the way that this is run, because this is how a startup should run. It should sort of run on its own steam before it starts to gather more money from outside and everything. So we wish them all the luck. We've had them on the show here, and it's been fantastic. All right, wow, 25 minutes already into this. This is crazy. Let's talk about the eSTOL world and the eCTOL world. And so on the eSTOL world, we have obviously Electra. Electra is pretty much winning all the races right now. They've done a really good job, because where did I put my, I didn't put it in my article. I guess I should have. They have done, that's because I have a whole article dedicated to what they've done. They've also diversified their strategy by opening the dual mode operations, much like Archer and Joby and Beta have done, but they work with the military, which means that their eSTOL is perfect for military application. In fact, the airplane is, with its onboard that recharges, that uses a generator to recharge the batteries, can also recharge drones. So, and if you don't know anything about eSTOLs, they take off on a very short runway and can land on an even shorter runway, meaning that if we have anywhere from, let's say, 200 feet to 500 feet, we could have a runway that is operational for eSTOLs, some eCTOLs, very light ones, and of course, we can have a bunch of vertipads on it, with probably the one in the middle with a FATO this big, so that when we have 10, 20, 40 seaters, they can come in and land, just like Oshkosh uses its big long runway to have 3 airplanes land at the same time. So Electra, when it comes to the eSTOL industry, definitely gets the gold medal. There's another company that we don't write that much about, and I could kick myself because they're in Long Beach, California, where we lived 17 years of our life up until 5 years ago, and that's Otis. And Otis is doing a fantastic job and still moving forward. We have invited them many times to the podcast. We hope that they will come, because we need to hear about them and not just Electra. Hey, love you, Electra, but hey, let's talk about the others too, okay? We're going to move to the eCTOL side of things, and this is where we have probably a little bit less, but it doesn't mean it's bad news. I reconnected with Kevin Nordiker, who is the CEO and founder of Ampere, and that's a company that I met way back, when we were living in Long Beach, when I went to Hawthorne to see what they were doing. And the beauty about Ampere is, while everybody was talking about electricity, going pure electricity, and then kind of going, maybe we need hydrogen, maybe we need onboard charging solutions, Ampere said, no. We've got to be pragmatic about this. We got tons of airplanes right now. Some of them are getting old. Some of them you have to replace the engines and the pistons and the turbines. Well, how about we just use a hybrid solution, and then we put electric motors where the propellers are, and we use an engine to recharge the batteries. And this is how they got started. So we had a really good podcast right here on the ways we move with Kevin. And he explained staying true to that philosophy despite the pressures from investors, from people around saying, why don't you? But Kevin was true to himself. And if you know actually Kevin on a personal level, Kevin is one of those really elegant souls. A handshake is a handshake, that kind of person. So I deeply respect Kevin, and definitely gets the gold medal in 2025 for still doing 10 years later what he started off as doing. Well, anyway, we'll talk a lot more about Ampere in the coming year, because they are working on bigger airplanes right now. They're working on a Caravan, and of course the Otters, the Twin Otters, and things like that. So these guys, gotta watch out for them. some of the companies that I'm still waiting to hear from, and I really hope they will make it, is George By Aerospace with its a two-seater and eventually four-seater electric aircraft. I can't wait to hear more about it. And also, hey, whatever happened to the Alice, eVation's Alice? That was a terrific aircraft, so I hope that will take off. But almost a half hour into it, we only talked about the aircraft. What a shame, because what's the most important part of advanced air mobility? Give you a hint. No, I'm not going to give you a hint. It's infrastructure, of course, because without infrastructure, these are very expensive, albeit very pretty aircraft that have nowhere to go, nowhere to fly except be up in the air. And then what? The infrastructure world is very interesting. And if you think about it, if you want to give a snapshot of our industry, well, the aircraft side of things really is happening in the USA. But the infrastructure side of things is really happening in Europe. Case in point, Skyports is in Europe. Blue Nest is down in Spain, and Urban V is in Italy. So everything is pretty much over there when it comes to infrastructure, and over here, it's the aircraft. Well, that was up until, and you might have seen it, one of our last episodes with Robert Bassi, who first came on, by the way, to say he was leaving the FAA after having done an incredible job for infrastructure, being a deep part of EB 105A, which is what we refer to in terms of infrastructure, what to do, what not to do. But now he stepped into a new role. He went to the private sector, and he is working with the very first, and I would say, we can say it is the very first American infrastructure company, and it's called Avica Sky. Just wrote a great article about it. It was on the last podcast. I highly suggest you watch it, because this is really great. This is going to be very interesting. I forgot to mention another gold medal, and I mean this with all the respect in the world, and that's SkyDrive, and I can't believe I didn't put it into the earlier part of the eVTOL section. SkyDrive is a company I've been working with since pretty much day one, and I've been privileged to follow them around the world. I was at the Paris Air Show with them, not even with one release. We had 3 releases at the same time. This is the kind of company SkyDrive is: pragmatic, very Japanese, one step at a time. We're building upon the success of what we're building on. But there's something that SkyDrive did in 2025 which deserves maybe not even a gold medal, but a platinum medal. They answered one of the fundamental promise of advanced air mobility, and that is to connect the dots. How did they do this? Well, this is something we had been working on for a few years. I'm finally excited that we can say that in 2025, they announced that they were working with metro lines, or the metro companies out there in Japan. Think about it: connecting a vertiport to a metro station, connecting a metro line to a vertiport to a train station. This is one of the fundamental promise of advanced air mobility, is that it's not just a new mode of propulsion. No, I mean, urban air mobility has been around since the 1950s, but it is that it democratizes our life in the sense that we can go from a train station to a harbor to an airport using air mobility. And SkyDrive did it. So I'm really excited about that. And I apologize I didn't put it up there where it should have been, but that is definitely, for me, yeah, it's definitely a platinum medal. I have to talk about the AAM Masterclass, and this is something that's near and dear to me. I just wrote a good article on that one too, and I explained a little bit about how it came about. But basically, 3 years ago, all of us felt a bit of a burnout with events. You know, we were seeing the same people, myself included, saying the same things all over again. And it was a little bit boring. And it was, yeah, networking, but it became expensive to just network like that. So a lot of us started to not go to these events. And sadly, so this year, we lost a lot of events. We lost Revolution Era. We lost a lot of events. One of the events I still did, that's the only one I wanted to really do. I was going to do Move America, but it happened at the same time as I was doing that event. And that was the eVTOL Show USA. The reason why that is so amazing, and I just realized I had an article that never went out on electricairmobility.news. I will put it, albeit a little late, but it'll be there. It's that it's the only event that I know of that packs everything within a day. And the only event where you go from very high level strategic global view to down to the bolts, and I really do mean bolts because we have cable makers out there and you hear about so many wonderful things. I love the eVTOL show. I'm a big fan. I chaired again this session for the second time in 2 years, and I love it. I love it. A lot of great business deals have happened. We had eHang come over and show us a real 216, and that was amazing. We had their CFO come there. It was a really big deal. But the other big news for me this year, at least that I'm celebrating, is after feeling this burnout and wondering, well, what else can we do with all of these events? I mean, we're just rehashing the same here. One of the suggestions I came up with, because originally I was a trainer, I was a teacher, I thought, why don't we make it more educational instead of just promotional? And that led to a lot of discussions, but I couldn't find the right partners. And about a year ago, a little bit over a year ago, I met Nadia Pak actually, it was last August for the Air Taxi Congress Dubai, which didn't happen. That was a very interesting event, to say the least. But with Nadia, we got along really well. And by November, I was telling her of this idea I have had, and I was still looking for the right partners and everything. And she said, I'll be your partner. So Nadia and I launched the AAM Masterclass, and we did a great job. We invited another partner after this, and that partner was in charge of basically, selling the event and everything. But the one thing that we noticed is, after the event, we noticed that we had too many things happening, too many directions we wanted to get into. So we each went our own way. But let me tell you about what happened in September. September, as you probably have read and have seen here, September was our kickoff of our AAM Masterclass. And this is, for me, 3 years of hard work that finally delivered. But the feedback, the success, took me by surprise. Now, I heard things like, wow, finally no cheerleaders here, meaning at the class. Only sober people in the room. Wow, that's fantastic. This is absolutely amazing. So let me tell you a little bit about how I really imagined it. So being a trainer, being a teacher, I understand a lot about training and education. So I wanted to start with, obviously, the academia side of things. So we had our esteemed colleagues, Marilyn Smith, who is a professor at Georgia Tech. We had Adam Cohen, who's a professor at UC Berkeley. We had a bunch of people on the academia side of things talk about the theoretical part of what's happening in advanced air mobility. But after that, I also asked my good friends whom you've seen here, Rex Alexander, Clint Harper, Curtis Grad, come and talk about what's happening out there right now based on that, what you've just learned on the theoretical side of things, the academia side of things. So we had the academia, and then we had the practical. So what do we need to do after this? Well, we need to drive it home, right? So we created workshops. And I have to tell you, there's something absolutely professionally satisfying when you see people from Korea and Peru and everything in between working on one single problem and finding solutions, because each has something else that the other didn't have. And this was that kind of satisfaction I had. That I still have a lot of clips I need to somehow put on this, but I will have an end of year kind of best moments of the AAM Masterclass. So yes, so we split up, and Rose is going to do the aviation side of the AAM Masterclass. I'm going to take on the more infrastructure side of things, meaning, not only the OEMs, and of course, sometimes some airports, that's part of it, like Airp and all these people will be invited, but we're going to have our next session, Hours Electric Air Mobility, in Vancouver next year. And I already said it, we partnered with Modalis, with our good friends Curtis Grad, who will help us launch our second edition there. Stay tuned for more, because I'm super excited about that. This has been really a fantastic year for this. That's pretty much it, really, when I think about what's been happening this year. There's been a lot of false starts, a lot of great projects that never took off. That's part of life. On a personal level, there's definitely been a lot of projects that we're still waiting to happen. But there are a lot of projects that are moving on. And in fact, I can tell you that we're working on two, personally, electric air mobility here in my company. We're working on two projects that are potentially amazing, right? And we'll talk about it hopefully in a few months. We keep on thinking next month, but it's, there's always something else going on. But the companies have been incorporated. The coders are already working on the prototypes. Everything is there. We just need the right timing. The one thing that I have learned, in fact, having been the chief strategy officer of Volatus, a startup that's still around, by the way, is timing is so crucial, and timing is everything. And we were promoting something a little too early and without having the right people around. And that is a dear lesson that I thought I knew, but something that we've learned the hard way. So we're doing it the right way now. We're going to introduce a few things in a few months, and you will hopefully be wowed, because it's, again, a lot of work. Just like the AAM Masterclass, it takes sometimes 3 years to make something happen. And in this case, we're right around that 3-year cusp where we will make things happen, and hopefully to wow you. Again, thank you for making The Ways We Move, the podcast that highlights innovative mobility solutions and the people behind them, such a success. It really took me by surprise, and I'm deeply humbled to be able to work with you all and to have your kudos. Please continue to continue to subscribe. It means a lot to us, because that's how we can attract sponsors and continue to give you free quality content. 2 things about that part. We are still looking, obviously, for sponsors, so we'd love to hear from you if you would like to help us. Promise you we won't ask for a Dassault 8X or a Ferrari, but anything you can do definitely helps us a lot. So I have to highlight my very first infrastructure company here that helped us and sponsored the very first sponsor of The Ways We Move. And that was back in July, by the way, when we started talking about it, but things got underway in October. So The Ways We Move already has its first sponsor, and that's from our good friend, Sean Borman, who was here very early on in the year and talked about the good work they're doing at Aero Auto Global. We've also had Charlie Kesterbaum, who delighted us with some amazing stories. And this week, I'm actually I'm recording with Steve, he is the CTO of the company. So he'll tell us a little bit more about his background and how he sees the company evolving. And next we will have, yes, Paul Kemen, you will be on it. And I will drag you into this because I know you're reluctant to talk, but man, you have so many great stories to tell and you're just an amazing soul. So we have 4 episodes basically that Sean has very generously accepted to sponsor. And I'm very, very proud of that moment. Also, I will have enough time to finalize my Patreon site where we're going to talk a lot more about what's happening behind the scenes. And yes, it will be a pay-per-view. Whatever you can afford will help us greatly. I need a new microphone. I need new headsets. I need new computers all the time. Give me technology. No, I'm kidding. I'm not like that. I work on Linux and I really squeeze everything as much as I can. But I do need a new laptop. I do need a new tablet. Those would really help me a long way for my presentations and, of course, what I do here. So I hope you've enjoyed this end of year 2025. What does 2026 look like? Well, it looks like more of the same. Pretty much. The work is really happening under the radar, under the public radar. It's going to be under the press releases and the fluffy and hyped up press releases. This is really figuring out how safety works, how components interact with one another. We're hoping to hear a lot more from the charging industry, from the energy industry, because the one thing that still remains a problem to this day when it comes to advanced air mobility is the energy equation. No utility in the world, as that I know of, can generate or transmit as much power as we need for these aircraft to work. And if you think I'm exaggerating, we're tabulating anywhere from 10 to 50 megawatt of power every day. And think about 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the afternoon when it's hot, ACs are working, utilities are choking up as much as they can, and we need that energy reliably every day. No utilities can do that. And that's why we're working with companies on the infrastructure side of things with electric air mobility. We're working with companies, we're working with micro nuclear reactors that are very safe, obviously, that I can talk about that forever. We're also working on companies that have turbines that burn very clean fuel, such as ammonia with a little bit of hydrogen in it. There are tons of solutions, which I guess leads me for my last sentence of this podcast, and that's the quote I start with every time I write anything in my articles or on electric air mobility is that there are more solutions than obstacles. And truly that is the case. We sent people to the moon, 3 people to the moon a few times, right? Using something as simple as a pocket calculator, what we have today in our pockets, right? Our smartphones are way more powerful than any of the computers that sent these modules on the face of the moon. Now, I know there's some conspiracy theories out there who have a lot of questions about that, and I find those questions quite interesting. But having said this, technology moves in leaps and bounds, and it's been pretty exciting to see how everything has changed, how everything is maturing. But when it comes to the energy side of things, we need a lot more, and we need a lot more than companies making record profits. We need upgrades. We need to update a lot of things. And so this is really where 2026 is going to be very crucial. Can utilities provide the energy that we need? And the other one is public outreach, really, public desirability. It's presenting AAM as a way to make it desirable for people. And this is going to be the two big fights we're going to have this coming year. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. This is an end of the year, wrapping it all up together. I'll try to put all the links to all the stories and all the podcasts that we've had. I've already done that on electricairmobility.news. Please check out the website. And unfortunately, I don't write on it as often as I would like to. But again, if you can sponsor and help us, especially by going to our Patreon site once it's up and running, it will help me offload a little bit of what I do on the side to really concentrate on this, because that's the one thing I learned this year is this is really where my happiness lies. Talking to y'all, going on stage, doing this podcast, the communication side of things, the outreach, working with cities, working with communities. This is just, for me, very fun. It's not work. I could do this until I'm well past my time, probably even in a wheelchair, who knows, in 30 years. But anyway, that's it for this year. Thank you for making 2025 the year of the ways we move. It's been fantastic, and I certainly look forward to 2026. Please keep on liking, keep on subscribing, and share this platform with other people. And if you work in any of these industries, maritime, railroad, automotive, or aerospace, anything that moves with electricity, let us know about it. We'd love to talk to you guys. For now, thank you. Have a wonderful end of year. Happy holiday seasons, and we'll see you in 2026. Bye now.